It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to this episode of Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today is a fun topic. And honestly, it was super easy for us to decide on this topic today because it comes up a lot. It comes up a lot in my DMs. It comes up a lot with clients, just people at every different part of their health fitness journey. So we want to talk about, should you track macros? And that is a very blanket question, but it really depends on so many factors. And we kind of have all of these like caveats, of course, that we want to cover. So specifically, we'll start with first in terms of getting physical results or changing your physique, because that's usually 99% of the time what women are coming to us for. Should you track macros for physique change? I feel like we could talk a lot about this. There are women who come to me and say, I've tried it before and I didn't like it, or tracking macros didn't work for me, or which is my favorite statement ever, or I didn't like it, or it was too hard, or it was confusing, or I didn't know if it was the right numbers for me. So there are absolutely like a plethora of ways to track macros, in my opinion. And also it can be very confusing if you're just like diving in and giving it a go. So your starting point matters for sure with this and understanding it and really grasping the concept of it. But I guess I should pull back a little bit because I don't know who's actually listening to this podcast, but macros or macronutrients are protein, fats, and carbohydrates. They each have their own like caloric makeup, and those three macronutrients make up your total calories in your day that you consume, right? So when you want to make a change to your physique, the word calorie deficit is always out in the world. We know that you have to eat less than you burn. Did I say that right? Eat less than you burn to lose fat, and be in a calorie deficit. So there are so many nuances to macros just in general with physique change and health, but can you get results without tracking? And it's funny, Jess and I are like trajectory as coaches. We kind of talked about this in another episode too. It's so different. I was like hard and fast. I mean, my like long-standing history was just calorie restriction, but I got into macros very early in the game. Like 2014 is when I discovered macro tracking, if it fits your macros, all that stuff. Whereas you were more count your calories.
So I think I went both directions. So in 2012, I was tracking macros for when I was competing in Miss Delaware. And that was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, I can just manipulate this and change my physique. And it was like one of those things where it was an unhealthy, low amount of calories because it was just whatever the app spit out based on my current like age, height, weight, whatever. And I'm very short. So it spit out 1,200 calories. And I lost a lot of weight and I got really, really lean. But I didn't realize that there was a way that I could maintain my physique without having to diet that low all the time. So because that was my experience, then when I became, I then stopped tracking for a while, whatever. I just like lived my life. I was still focused on healthy things. But when I became a trainer, saw so many women coming to me after competing in bodybuilding competitions who had horrible relationships with food that I went the opposite direction. So I had an understanding of tracking macros and how it could help you manipulate your physique. But I actually encourage people, hey, let's count colors. Let's add real foods. Let's add proteins. So ultimately, me and Jill over here doing two different things. She's having her clients track macros. I'm having my clients pay attention to food quality. We're both achieving the same results. Our clients are eating more protein. They're eating more fiber. Naturally, they're more full, so their calories end up coming down and they end up seeing physique results. So it's kind of full circle now. Like Jill came from this place of super, if it fits your macros, whatever, it'll fit. And I came from like food quality, let's eat really well and then we'll feel good and your physique will follow. We both use both now, really, with our clients. So if somebody's coming to us and they're initially looking for physique change, which most women are, even though by the time they leave, we're like, okay, now you're focused on strength, you're focused on health, you're focused on how you feel. Physique is now a side effect. But usually when they start with us physique change is some sort of goal. With that, I always start people with tracking macros. And again, it's not because there's some magic in macros. Like, as a good coach, we understand how and when to manipulate and adjust your goals based on how your body's adapting. So it's not just looking up a macro calculator and sticking to it. That's not going to work because eventually your body's going to adapt. But if you're working with a good coach on how to manipulate them properly, it's just collecting really good data on what are you actually eating. That's all it is. It's just giving us more data to work with. And yeah, should everybody track their macros? No. And I don't think macro tracking is a forever lifestyle. I do not track my macros. I do not track my food. But I have a really good awareness of what I'm eating. So when my pants start to fit a little big or a little tight, or if I'm going on, I don't know, a beach vacation or something, I can use tracking as a tool and get myself feeling pretty great and lean within a couple months because I have that tool in my back pocket. But most of my life is spent not tracking, listening to my body, and just trying to add nutrients. And that's the place we hope all of our clients get someday. But usually to get to the place where you're feeling really good in your skin, it might take years of tracking to get there. And then once we're there, then we always try to teach people how to incorporate more intuitive eating days until eventually we wean them off of tracking.
I want to add a caveat to what you just said too, because you said that you can just bring tracking in at any time and make this physique change. But it's also important to note that Jess is very experienced and she is eating at her maintenance.
I eat a lot.
Her body, right? So she's not willy-nilly stressed. I don't eat breakfast, only coffee until 2:00. I might have a sandwich, gorging at dinner. If that's her habit, just incorporating tracking in and of itself isn't going to make her lose weight. It's because she's being a little bit more regimented and likely eating more because we both are foodies. It's allowing her to have more awareness and pull back. A lot of women don't eat enough because they've been dieting for so long and that's what they've normalized. But when you normalize maintenance and you know what it feels like to fuel your body and give yourself enough and do all those things, then creating a deficit is a different conversation.
That's a good point. I had a call with a client this morning where we talked about this. So when we first worked together, I took her through a muscle building phase, an intentional reverse diet, because she has dieted on and off for years. She saw really, really excellent physique change as a result. And then we were able to cut back, I think, to 1,800 calories, and she saw really good results. Mm-hmm. Through our next reverse diet, she was like, oh, I'm just going to intuitively eat more. And she was not following my suggestions in terms of really sticking to it and being strategic. So when she tried to cut calories again, her body didn't respond. And she's like, what's happening? Why isn't this working? I'm at 1,600 calories. And I'm like, it's because you're not in a deficit, because you were kind of willy-nilly during that reverse. And that's okay. It's just how your body has adapted. So again, like me saying I can pull out this tool of tracking and just cut myself down to maybe 1,900 calories and see pretty good physique change. That's because most of my year, every year, is spent between like 2,400 and 2,600 calories. So that's why my body responds like that. If you're dieting all the time, if you're on and off of Weight Watchers or Optivia or Ozempic or whatever, your body's probably already adapted to low calories, and you may need to track yourself up and live there for a while first before you'll achieve that same adaptation.
Yeah. And it's that statement too that I get of like, tracking macros didn't work for me. And I'm like, okay, but like tracking macros in and of itself is not a named diet like Optavia or like Weight Watchers or keto or whatever. It doesn't fall into that category, because any of those diets that you've done, Weight Watchers, Slim Fast, Beachbody, Optavia, Whole30, they all require macronutrients, because that is what makes up our food. So macros aren't a diet. They're our nutrition. They literally,
whether you are tracking or not, you are eating macronutrients.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a strategic way to manipulate them. And you also made a good point about, this happened to me yesterday. Somebody messaged me and said, can I just pay you for one time like macro calculation? And I said, I cannot ethically give you that information because I don't have enough context or data on you as a person, your diet history, your lifestyle, anything. Not to mention, let's say I give it to you and it works, right? And you're like, cool, I'm in a deficit. What are you going to do when it adapts? Are you just going to call me every couple of weeks or months and pay me for another one-time macro calculation? Or are you just going to fucking hire me as your coach and let me do that for you, right? Like you're going to adapt. So we might change somebody's macros 10 plus times, right? Throughout like a certain phase, depending on like what our starting point is and all of that. So it's also important to understand metabolism, the way that we're using macros, right? In terms of making a physique change. Now, let's say you're like, macros are tedious, that you're confusing, they're hard. I don't want to track. Then I'll say, great, what's your goal? And they'll say, I want to lose 20 pounds. And I'm like, okay, how do you plan to do that without tracking, right? Because so many people say like, oh, I did keto and it worked great. So I went back to it. And I'm like, it's because you created a calorie deficit, right? But you're doing it in a way that you just told me you hated keto and that you love bread and that you don't want to do it, but you don't know what else to do. That's why I love macros, because there is no restriction under this umbrella. But like Jesse said, we're kind of meshing it all together in terms of health, and having all of this data is, yeah, we eat our protein, we get our fiber, we count our colors, right? But we're doing it in a way where it's okay to have a cookie, or it's okay to have a slice of birthday cake. We're not doing it every day. It's okay to have a margarita on, Friday night. You can fit those things in, but it's just not a free for all the time. Whereas keto is just hard and fast, no carbs. Yeah, you're just creating a deficit. So it's just a different worse way to do it, in my opinion.
And here's how I do it. Just if you are one of those people who's like, okay, I really want to lose weight, but I'm not going to track my macros or whatever. The results are going to be slower. But when I was training in the gym and I wasn't having people track and I wasn't reviewing it with them every single week and all that, I was having them use a habit tracker, but they were still measuring something. So we were still collecting data that we could then manipulate up or down. So usually the data. Yes, exactly. Yep. Yes. So this is more of an estimate. It's way less reliable data, but it's some data that we can build on. I would have them measure, okay, how many servings of protein are we getting a day? How many servings of fruits and veggies? And I would show them like, okay, generally a serving of meat is going to be the size of the palm of your hand. And we would go off of that, but we would still have some sort of concrete data that we could then adjust week over week, because eventually your body will adapt. So I think it's important to know, like, if you are comfortable just focusing on nutrient quality and nutrient density for the sake of your health, right on. That's where we want all of our clients to get.
Yes.
We are specifically talking about if you are unhappy with the physique results that you are achieving, then you probably just need to spend some time on this tedious thing. And we can teach you ways to make it less tedious so that it can become just a system. But if you want to see physique change, it's a very reliable way to do it, to get you from point A to point B. And then when you're really happy with your physique, again, we're focusing on healthy habits along the way too. We are not physique first.
Not one or the other. Yeah.
But then when you get from point A to point B, where you're like, wow, I feel really healthy and happy in my skin, then we are talking about, okay, now here's how to ease away from that. So we're just focusing on, okay, are we fueling? Do we have enough energy? Is our libido still good? Are there signs that I'm underfeeding myself? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's baffling, absolutely baffling to me how many women I talk to on a daily basis that come to me and say, I don't know why I can't lose weight. And my first question is, do you know how many calories you're eating? And they say no, more than 90% of the time. And I'm like, how can you say you don't know why you're not losing weight? You're probably overeating, right? Like that's what it is. Or you've been under eating for a long time and metabolically you're not in a good place. But guess what? If you're not losing weight, you're still overeating, right? It's just at a different metabolic rate. So the beauty of macros is when a client is checking in with us on a weekly basis, if we aren't seeing the rate of progress or progress in general that we expect as a coach when we're looking at the data, we now have to think, what's the missing link here? Okay, we're checking strength workouts. Are we progressing in our lifts? Are we hitting the step goal that we anticipated based on activity level? Are we managing sleep and stress, right? We're looking at all those factors, but then we look and say, how consistent are we with nutrition? If they're super consistent with everything and metabolically, we just reverse dieted somebody for 6+ months and we know they should be losing weight, then we have to look further, right? It might be, maybe they just adapted to that calorie intake and we do need to adjust and go a little bit further. But it's really, really hard. And this is why Jess said it could take a very long time and be a lot more time consuming if you're not tracking, because when you get to that point, what do? How do you know what to manipulate if you have no data to reference? Now, if you're being mindful of your choices and all those things and, just adding some extra movement or steps, great, you might see some more progress, but like, you don't really know for sure what variable needs to be manipulated or what thing is actually holding you back. And that's why I love macros so much, because they give you that flexibility and that freedom to not have this like toxic relationship with food, but also you know exactly what needs to be manipulated when things aren't going the way that you expect it to. And then the final transition when clients graduate from us is for them to not be tracking. We don't want clients to track forever. I get it. It's nice to not do it, but you do the things you got to do when you want something to change, right? You can't just say, I don't want to track my food, but I want to lose 30 pounds in 6 months. Like, okay, well, good luck, right? I wish you the best. But we want our clients to get to a place where you eat intuitively. And it's very funny. We weren't recording yet before this call, but we were actually going back and forth on the word intuitive or eating.
Like we initially disagreed on this because Jill, I think your statement was, you cannot intuitively eat if you've never counted macros. And I said, I disagree hard. And here's how I would approach that. And we, by the end of talking it back and forth, like we agree, we're on the same page, but we're saying it differently. Yeah. So Jill's assumption, I guess, of the word intuitive is the place that people come from when they just say like, I'm just listening to my body. I'm letting myself have it because I want it. Yeah. That is not either of our definition of what a healthy intuitive eating looks like. Okay. So we both intuitively eat the majority of the time. And we're at that place with our health and our bodies where we just feel good doing that. When I say that, I mean, I am still focusing on adding nutrients so that my body feels good. I know what a nutrient dense plate looks like. So if I have a client because I have some clients who we've only done habit tracking, we've only looked at counting colors on their plate and stuff. I'm still collecting some sort of data from them and I'm still educating them as we go. So maybe they're sending pictures of their meals and we're looking at like, hey, we need to add some fruits and veggies, or we're probably not getting enough protein because I just saw we had, even though they're healthy choices, we only had oatmeal for lunch and then a whole grain piece of bread for breakfast or whatever. And it's like, hey, these are all healthy choices in themselves, but you've only eaten carbs all day. So there needs to be some sort of education that goes along with it. It's not healthy. Intuitive eating is not like, oh, well, I heard counting calories is mentally unhealthy, so I'm just going to eat whatever I want. Because that is unhealthy in a different way if you're doing it that way. So there's a lot of registered there's a lot of registered dietitians that I follow who are very anti macro counting because they've worked with women who have had very severe eating disorders and they don't want to perpetuate that by them tracking calories, right? I can totally understand that. And I've worked with several women who have had eating disorders. And I've had some who are very successful who actually unwind those unhealthy thought patterns while tracking macros because they learn, oh, wow, it's safe for me to eat more so that they stop worrying about it. I've had others who it doesn't go great and we pull back from the tracking. So it's totally individual, but any of those registered dietitians who are anti-tracking are also educating their clients on what healthy foods look like and to add protein and to add fiber and to listen to your body and not super restrict and not cut out things you enjoy. So at the end of the day, we're getting the same outcomes. Intuitive eating is an awareness around adding healthy things to fuel your body so that you can feel and be healthy. It is not eat whatever you want because your body feels like it. And TikTok told me to intuitively eat. Intuitive eating isn't eating every time you have a craving. It's not eating it because that's what you love and it makes you happy. No, that's not intuitive eating. And it's funny. Jess and I were like, at the end of our conversation, we're like, wait, yeah, we're definitely on the same page. But when I was like, no, give me your argument. I want to hear this when we just had this conversation because, she's explaining what she did with her clients. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're giving them that education, right? But like, if you have no knowledge base on what 4 ounces of protein looks like, right? Like what you have to understand those things and what nutrients come from what foods and how to make a well-rounded, we talk about eating a rainbow, like good variation in your diet. If you don't understand any of those concepts, you can't eat intuitively. There's no intuition to go off of other than your cravings that are misleading you. And And that's because our bodies are built for survival. So things that are calorically dense will mislead our brains. This is what marketing, this is how food companies market to us by making things more palatable, by adding oils and salts and sugars so that we are addicted to them because our bodies say, yay, more calories is going to keep us alive. So then we crave more and more and more of it. So if you only go off of feelings and cravings, you are bound to be overweight and unhealthy.
Yeah. And also, I think too, like, if a woman comes to me and says that tracking macros felt restrictive or she got obsessive with it, what I find, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but what I find almost every single time in a scenario where somebody comes to me and says that I was obsessed with my macros, it's because their macros were set to still 1,200 calories, right? And they were endlessly dieting at 1 calorie and macro goal, right, forever and not seeing results. Or they were driving themselves crazy all day, inputting their fast food, inputting the, muffin somebody brought them at work, right? They're totally like free balling with their tracking. Of course you're going to
we call it like playing macros Tetris.
Yeah.
If you go into it thinking like, these are the targets I need to hit, and then ding, 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 here's my choices for breakfast. Just add it in. You get to the end of the day, and that does sound stressful.
I got 80 grams of protein and 40 grams of fat and 0 carbs left. What do I eat? I'm like, you don't. You just call today, wash, and start over tomorrow.
So instead, what I have clients do is like, and Jill, I think, always has her clients track the night before. Hey, track every night before. And even if that's just a mental scan of like, what do I have in my fridge right now? Okay, cool. I could have Greek yogurt with my snack. I could have some eggs with my breakfast. If nothing else, input some proteins that you're going to have and some fibers you're going to have. And then those leftover calories you can input, you can be more flexible on throughout the day because carbs and fats are very abundant in our world right now, right? So at least pre-tracking your proteins and fibers will help set you up for success. And if you can create systems like that, you start to realize like, oh, okay, generally we eat the same 5 or 6 dinners on repeat. A lot of people have the same kind of routine. Once you get used to that, then you kind of know what your repertoire is that you're pulling from. So that you can kind of mix and match, and it becomes a lot easier with time.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, when I talk about pre-tracking too, like I'll even tell clients, they're like, it's too much or whatever. I just talked to my husband about this the other day. He was like, tracking's so annoying. And I was like, how on God's green earth is tracking annoying for you? You are so regimented, and he eats literally the same apple at the same time every day. He eats 2 clementines at the same time every day. I'm like, what is your issue with tracking? Track one day. It'll cover you for the next 6 months until you get sick of these foods. Like, you don't have to track every day if it's the same thing. I tell clients, hey, if you're meal prepping and you're eating the same thing Monday through Thursday, cool, track one day and don't touch your phone Tuesday to Thursday. I don't care. You don't have to actually input it as long as you're communicating to me that you didn't not eat those days or free for all, like, right, eat whatever you want. So the
point is just to have like measured data on what we're consuming so that we can make sure we're getting enough nutrients, period. It's not so that we are obsessive with our phones or knowing exactly what we have at every, and I feel the same way about measuring and weighing food too. Like I might use that as a tool for somebody in their first month, so that they build an awareness around what 4 ounces of chicken looks like. But eventually I do not want my clients doing that. I don't want somebody thinking that they need to weigh and measure all their food and worrying about it when they're at a restaurant. Like I want people to learn how to enjoy their life and find a healthy balance between the two by maybe we're controlling more so the meals that are boring, that are at home, our breakfasts, our snacks are like, I work from home, so I can be pretty regimented. If I want to just have a whim of ordering out on a lunch on a Tuesday, it's like, I know myself, I would probably rather save up those calories for brunch with girlfriends on Saturday. Right. So it's like a lot of our conversations with clients are talking them through how to create systems to allow them to get enough nutrients and live their life and enjoy stuff that they love without feeling like they need to restrict. I also think for a second, I want to talk about, I've had a few, so I mentioned I've had several clients, a few handfuls of clients who have had previous eating disorders. And again, the first couple I ever had, I was very like, okay, I'm not going to have you track. Like we'll just do hand sizes and portions and colors and all that. Yeah. And now I actually have taken an opposite approach because I've seen it go so well. Now, if I know somebody's struggling with that, I'm always recommending that they're also working with a therapist on the headspace side of it. That's very, very important. But when somebody has struggled, I've seen them unwind those thought patterns where they start to realize like, wow, I used to eat 1,000 calories a day or less, or eat and purge, like whatever. And now I'm at this place where we've built, and I'm eating 2,000 calories a day and I'm not gaining weight. Yeah. And they're like blown away that they're not gaining weight. And I'm like, cool. Now let's stop weighing in as frequently. So that's another data point that is off of your radar. So we can just live life and enjoy and not obsess over food all the time. So it's really important you have a good coach going into this. Whether you have struggled with your relationship with food or not, because I've also seen it go in the opposite directions where bad coaches are obsessed with the data and they're obsessed with weight loss. And if you everybody needs to find a coach who is health first, physique second. If you have a physique first coach, again, these are the women who had competed in bodybuilding before. And then I would train them and be like, what in the world, or what am I dealing with here? This is so dysfunctional. Make sure your coach is not obsessed with physique first, okay? The data that they are collecting should be to support your health, and they should have conversations with you saying, okay, if this is the direction you want to go, I don't actually recommend that, and I don't think it's the healthiest way. You need to make sure you have a good fitness professional who knows how to shift gears too. Like I have people where I'm like, you know what? I think I would rather you not. Some people I have weigh in daily. I have other people where I'm like, I actually don't want you to weigh in for the next 2 months so we can only focus on how you feel, because it's becoming dysfunctional. Like you need a coach who can differentiate that to keep you in a healthy place. Because again, there's a lot of coaches who got into this because they used to be competitors and they themselves have unhealthy relationships with their physique. You don't need anybody projecting that onto you.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I was that coach back in 2014, 15, 16. It was very physique. I worked with competitors and that was my own, I was that person. I was projecting all of my like physical insecurities on other people, and we got to do more and we got to do this. And I mean, unfortunately, I guess I had to go through my own shit to realize like, wow, this is really toxic. And I actually pulled back for a couple of years from coaching because I was like, this doesn't feel good anymore. And there was a lot of education and things in between before I came back to doing it again. And it is like, you have to know, like a client tells you something or complains about something, and you have to recognize like, okay, what is this actually stemming from? Right. Like whatever it is. But that's why macros are so great. Which obviously I know we could talk about like the other sides of coaches. I'm sure that's a whole other episode coming soon to a theater near you. But in terms of tracking, all that being said, you have to be able to recognize those patterns. And is this too much? Because we're not like, nope, track macros. It's the only way you can change your physique. We're just saying, and I tell women this all the time, I'm happy to work with you and you not track. That's totally fine. Are you okay with, this timeline potentially instead of this one, right? Because it might be a little bit shorter, and nothing is guaranteed, because somebody could sign up and say they're going to track macros and not do a fucking thing too, right? Like, so there's nothing guaranteed about a timeline, but it's just knowing that we might have a little bit less data. And there are times as a coach where I'm like, hey, I'm actually not sure what to do here because I don't have enough data to direct you. Like, let's regroup and decide what's our goal and how do we want to approach this. And I think that's important. A coach shouldn't just be like, well, you didn't track macros, so can't help you. I don't know what to do. Like, just keep.
Yeah, that's a bad coach. That's a really bad coach. And they should be able to ask questions on, okay, what are we doing? What's one or two things we could build on? Like I have a couple girls right now who, and the majority of my clients track their macros and see really good results. I have a couple women right now who aren't tracking macros, but we are paying attention to, okay, every single night, they're just checking off how many servings of protein they had that day. So yeah, a good coach should be able to ask you the right types of questions. Again, this client I talked to earlier today, she hasn't tracked in a little bit. She kind of like, sometimes I'll call it going into hiding. Sometimes if people are off track, they'll hide from their coach because they're embarrassed or nervous or whatever. She kind of went into hiding a little bit, and I'm like, hey, like, I'm not judging whatever we're doing, like, but let's just touch base to figure out what's your goal right now. And like, let's get back on track. And if it's not tracking, that's cool. And she decided like, okay, well, here's what I want to do. And I'm like, okay, we got to figure out what your maintenance is now, because you haven't tracked for a couple months. So I'm just having her track whatever. I told her, don't change how you're eating. Just track everything this upcoming week. And let's see first before we decide which direction we need to go. We might need to reverse you back up and put on some muscle for the next few months before you're going to respond again, because you tend to skip meals and undereat. But like, get a week or two of a baseline first before you go ahead and just make an impulsive decision. Again, that would be the same thing as like looking up a macros calculator and expecting it to magically work. And it's like every single person's body is adapted differently. So your coach needs to like know how yours is adapting based on the inputs.
Right. Yeah. And like, when clients come in, we have them track for a few days and get a baseline. But I tell everyone this isn't like some magic initial number that I'm setting for you. This is like based on the data I have so far. And that's why every single week we're looking, I'm like, oh, I have more data and I actually think I want to go this direction, or I think we should do this, or wow, I can actually increase your calories way faster than I thought. We thought you were eating way less and you're actually in a good spot. Right. So that's the really cool part about the data. It gives us so much insight and it speeds up the process. Now, I will say that when you start tracking macros, can some random not coach person manipulate their macros in a calorie deficit and or in a reverse diet? Sure, you can learn that. Like I think both of us pump out enough content between our social media and our Facebook group. I actually had somebody recently tell me they binged my TikTok and lost 50 pounds on their own with macros. I was like, great, that's what I want for you, right? So you can do it on your own. I will say, if you're like, do I track macros? Do I not? Doing it on your own and manipulating your own macros can be difficult. And there's obviously a learning curve there. Doing it without tracking and wanting to see results in a certain time frame is even harder. So it kind of depends what direction you want to go. You just have to have some type of data to work off. Like Jesse said, like serving sizes or a number of servings of certain foods a day. Like you have to know those things. And you also have to know how to manipulate things based on your biofeedback, right? Based on the scale hasn't moved in 3 weeks, or based on like, all of a sudden I have brain fog all the time. Like this is the kind of stuff we talk through with clients when they bring this up. I'm like, great, let's talk about this. And let's talk about the last couple of weeks, what we've changed, why this new thing is happening. So you don't have to track macros is the moral of the story here. But me personally,
if you want physique change,
recommend it for physique
then
change.
it's like an A plus B equals C thing. Like it's a very
no-brainer in my opinion. I think it's the fastest way and the most flexible and most sustainable in my opinion too.
And when I was training in person and not having clients track macros, I'll tell you guys right now, just so you have like the secret sauce, all of those people who were seeing results without tracking were increasing their protein, adding really effective, good strength training 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah. And adding fruits and vegetables. Okay. So if you do nothing else, add strength, stop trying to burn off calories with cardio all the time, add protein, add fruits and vegetables.
Yep. Protein, fiber / colors, and lift weights.
And you may not see the scale change, right? Because you might not be cutting calories, but that's okay. You might start to feel leaner. You might start to feel more toned because you're putting on some muscle. But that's the way that I would approach it if you are choosing not to track macros. You don't just say, I'm intuitively eating, so I'm going to have a milkshake because I don't want to count my calories. It's like, no, even if you're not counting calories, you're still adding a shit ton of protein and strength and colorful whole foods.
Yeah. Yeah. So if tracking feels too tedious, 1, you're probably over restricting. 2, you are probably playing macro Tetris and you need to plan ahead a little bit better. Or 3, it might just be hard for a second and you just kind of got to get over that initial learning curve and that initial hump. I would say, I don't know if you agree with this, probably by like week 3, if a client comes to me like brand new to tracking, usually by week 3, they're like, they've got some meals locked and loaded. They're starting to find a groove. They're starting to understand how to manipulate things. It might not be perfect, but I would say 3 weeks. 3 weeks is nothing to learn a really incredible tool that can carry you through life with nutrition, right? And like Jesse said, I didn't track for, 4 years and I'm tracking now. I just can decide one day I'm going to track to change my physique and reel it in, like dial things in a little bit better. And you just do it, right? And that's the really cool part about it, especially like our clients, when they leave us, our goal is that they know exactly what to do and how to manipulate them too, right? It's not just do what I say for the next 6 months, 12 months, however long they're with us. And good luck when you're done. Hope you can maintain. We're constantly educating them on, hey, we're changing this thing. And this is why we think we should go in this direction. Okay, now that you're here, let's test a few days of not tracking, or maybe don't track your dinners this week, right? Like we're kind of weaning them off. But you can't get to that point and eat intuitively until you have some type of foundation developed.
And healthy habits that are consistent. This is a whole nother topic. I feel like there's so many that could spin off of this, but that's another red flag. If you're looking for a coach and they bring you down and help you lose weight, and then you're like, okay, great, I hit my goal, see ya. How are you going to maintain forever? Okay, so if we have a client who graduates, and I'm saying graduates because we have lots of clients who stop after their contract's up, where they are like, great, I saw my results, I'm going to leave, I can do it on my own, who don't learn how to maintain. The clients who truly graduate are the ones that we help them reverse diet back up so that they are eating a healthy amount. Again, they are not in a diet before we start intuitive eating too. So we're practicing maintaining with them. They are not hiring us just for weight loss. They're hiring us for healthy habits and to learn to keep it off forever. Again, like there's a lot of coaches who look real good on Instagram because they share all these before and afters of their clients. And then it's like, what happened to those clients after those 3 or 6 months that you posted their pictures? They dipped out because it was unsustainable the way that they got there. I would rather take longer to get physique change and really focus on helping somebody become healthy so that they can keep it off for the rest of their life than get you instant results just because it looks good for me as a trainer. Like I care way more about helping people maintain.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if a client signs up for, let's say 6 months with us, right? Usually month 3 to 4, we're starting to have conversation. I mean, we're always having these conversations and check-ins in terms of their goals and progress and all of that. But we're starting to have like, okay, where are we going with this? Because if you're like hard and fast, I only have 6 months for you. We kind of need to pivot, right? I can't just have you ride off into the sunset in this deficit because I need to make sure you know how to maintain whatever results we're getting here. But if, I map out a client's different phases, right? And okay, we're going to finish this deficit. And then we always try to reverse or at least start reversing somebody out of their deficit to bring those metabolic adaptations back up so that they're not calling us 2 months later like, oh, I gained some weight back or I fell off the wagon. And I'm like, well, no, if you stayed until I told you to, then we could have gotten you to a really healthy place metabolically where there is no rebound or back and forth or yo-yo, right? But it really does take time, and we're only doing it and talking timelines and realistic timelines being like 1 to 2 years is a solid amount of time. You have 30 pounds or more to lose, you have a long dieting history, and you haven't really lifted weights. You need about that amount of time to build muscle, to get your metabolism to a healthy place, to develop those healthy habits, to make it sustainable for you and go through these different phases and learn how to maintain on your own. That's a lot to cram into 6 months. We do everything that we can to move as fast as we can. But I think if everybody just gave it 1 to 2 years of like slow, steady changes day over day, we would all be fine. You guys wouldn't even need us anymore.
And that's the majority of our successful clients. Like we keep a tally of our client retention. Like we have everybody sign up for 6 months initially because we know you're not going to see the results you want to see in the first 3 months. We're spending 3 to 4 months building. And it depends. If you've been dieting for 20 years, you might need 6 months building before we ever try a diet or a deficit. I've been working for Jill now for, I think like 2 years and a month. And my average client stays with me for 12 or 13 months. It's like somewhere between that. Okay. So I have some who are a full 2 years and that's offset by some who after 3 months who haven't even gotten to their deficit yet are like, well, I didn't lose weight, so I'm out. And it's like the majority of clients who are really successful are here for a year to 2 years. And those clients leave us never, ever needing another diet program again, never needing to hire me again. And it's really cool getting updates from them a couple of years later and seeing like, wow, they're still maintaining. And that's because we just educated them versus just trying to get them results. We're educating them as we go.
Yeah, I actually had a former client message me recently, and she was with us for somewhere in the 6 to 12 month time frame, and she went off, did her own thing, she got great results, and she messaged me recently and was like, "Hey, I got a little lax with my diet. I started tracking, but I went through, I ate at maintenance. I was been lifting 4 days a week. She's giving me all this context, and she's like, "Can you just help me? Like, am I moving in the right direction with my deficit?" And I'm like, "Dude, yes, like you're doing great." Like that to me that's a massive win for our business because that means we did our job. She knows exactly what to do. She knew how to reel it in. She knew what to do to maintain. She was eating intuitively. She knew, okay, I want to reel it in. I want to dial things in. I'm going to go into a deficit. She manipulated beautifully. And I was like, dude, you're good. Like you don't even need me. You're on the right track. But that's where we want. But she did that because she spent all this time tracking and then we weaned her away from tracking. And she was actually somebody that likes to still track intermittently. She wasn't full on intuitive eating, if I'm understanding correctly based on our conversation, but, and that's okay too. Sometimes I'll have clients that are like eating intuitively and living life and maintaining, and they might go in and track a day, right? Just to like check in with themselves. Like,
Yep.
am I on the right track? Am I under eating protein? I need to do that. Like, I'll be like, oh, I'm fine. And then I track and I'm at 90 grams of protein. I'm like, fuck, I'm way off, right? Like I need to, be a little bit more mindful, but that's the other really cool part is you can just check in with yourself. Am I good? Yep. Okay. No more tracking, right? If you're maintaining, and not that you have to do that, but it's an incredible tool to have. So.
And usually those clients too, when they're texting us a year later, 2 years later, it is at a heavier weight. They are feeling so good physically and they look so healthy and they look fit and lean. And it's a heavier weight than they originally thought that they needed to be for their goal body. And they're happy with it and they're not weighing in all the time. And when they weigh themselves, they're surprised because it's muscle. And I actually just shared a picture of somebody like that who she finished up with us about 6 months ago. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like she's 8 pounds heavier and looks the exact same because she's just packing on muscle. So again, it's like unwinding that negative relationship with the scale and with the weight and all of that, and just focusing on health and how you feel, like really goes a long way in terms of maintaining the results that you're getting.
Mm-hmm. This is my last thought I think that I have on this topic, but that's the other thing too with tracking is so many women don't monitor their nutrition in any way, but they work out, they're very type A. They work out 4 or 5, maybe even 6 days a week. They're doing boot camps. They're working really hard. Like this isn't like I'm lazy and I'm not seeing results. It's like they're doing the things, right? But they're like, why am I doing all this? I'm working so hard and I'm not seeing the results. But then when they hire us and I look at their nutrition, I'm like, dude, you've been eating 1,300 calories and lifting 6 days a week. Like, I hate that for you, right? Like, and I never want to say that you're like wasting your time in the gym. Like, I'm glad that you have these healthy habits and routines, but like you're missing out on so much in terms of physique in the gym because your calorie intake is shit, right? So that's the other cool part about tracking is making sure that you're also supporting your body and fueling it, right? For life, for health, for feeling good, but then also to get the most out of the gym and out of the workouts when you're in a phase of like physique change, right? But also for health and just fueling your body too, to make sure you're eating enough. So that's the other, it's not just always about fat loss is my point. Anything else? I think we hit the.
No, I feel like that was solid.
Yeah. Okay. So moral of the story is you don't have to track macros for physique change, but you should. We think it's a great tool and you're going to get faster results. But it's not just about what fits in your macros. It's also about your health, and combining health and physique together to get the results that you're looking for, especially if you're looking to hire a coach to help you reach that goal. So I think that's all we have for this episode. I feel like I need to rewatch it and take notes because we have like 84 new topics from this one. So that's lovely. But I think that's all we have for you guys today. So until next time, see you later.